Zhaniya Aubakirova presents a series of discussions about the place of Kazakh culture in the global world. Meetings with prominent public figures, candid conversations, collisions of opinions, and discussions about the most important things.
Hello, dear friends. Today, our guest is Baurzhan Muratov. Our guest, Baurzhan Muratov, is not very well known to the Kazakh public. He's not an artist, he's not a writer, he's not a public figure either. However, he's engaged in activities that are extremely beneficial to people. He's a coach. He deals with matters of reason, intuition, the connection between consciousness and subconsciousness. He learns from the most qualified people in the world. And I'm very excited to talk to him today. Culture cannot be boiled down exclusively to the matters of creativity, art objects, or art phenomena. Culture is everything that surrounds us. All people in all spheres of human activity are somehow connected to culture, and the so-called level of culture directly depends on how we perceive our life. So we are meeting today because I truly believe that you are a representative of a very conscious part of our society, and I have confidence that we speak the same language. You are studying consciousness, you are studying some of our mental properties, perhaps even our subconscious and how we should work with it in the 21st century. It seems that these days is such a hot topic, as more and more people are becoming engaged in their spiritual development.
In fact, the culture and the level of culture are directly dependent on the development of consciousness. And while I, an expert in this area, was studying this topic in depth, I discovered more evidence of the existence of this relationship, meaning the more conscious life a person leads, the higher the chance that he will become interested in culture, music, and arts. Consciousness is primarily about oneself, right? Just think of it. Two different people, listening to the same music, can imagine completely different pictures and perceive this music in completely different ways. And it is precisely the level of development of consciousness that determines who sees what while being exposed to the works of art. Of course, our consciousness is primary because thanks to it you can paint any cultural phenomenon in the colors you want. And when I was studying this deeply for a long time, I realized how limitless our consciousness is.
I'll probably try to draw an analogy with my profession here. When I was finishing school and I was very young, it was then that I was given the opportunity to play with an orchestra for the first time. It's one thing when you play by yourself and completely different when there's a fairly large number of musicians behind you. When you do that, the power of the music increases so much that you have a feeling that you have wings and you soar above the ordinary world. It's like climbing the mountaintop, delivering music to the stars. Later, based on my entire experience in music, I realized that this is, and I say this without unnecessary pathos, this is space, this is the infinity, and this is the infinity of some incredible energies. And when you realize that, you just cease to be a common, down-to-earth person. And I teach this to my students. I tell them to keep their posture, to be as tense as a string. And above all, I always tell them to imagine that the sound is not limited to the room in which they are in, but that it travels to some distant stars. So my pedagogical method is built around awakening the imagination of my students. But this is how I was brought up too. It was never enough for me when I was just taught some techniques, of which there are an incredible variety. But when I was told, imagine something special, when I was offered to think in images, it was then that I was tapping into that special energy of understanding. And this is so interesting.
I absolutely agree with you, and moreover, you have now very clearly demonstrated an example of the work of mental models. When you are told to imagine that mountain over there, imagine space, imagine the universe, then your consciousness goes beyond this room. When a performer limits himself to the boundaries of the room in which he performs, when he limits himself to those few people for whom he plays, these are two completely different levels. And accordingly, the way the music sounds can be different too.
It's a huge difference.
This is the difference. Your perception of the world directly affects the world around you. For example, why are there stars of world magnitude? They may be identical in many respects to everyone else, but they think in different mental models. They play their music not for a couple of loved ones, but for the entire universe. And this is a completely different audience scale. And only your perception defines this way of thinking. It enables you to be who you are when you are performing. Can you imagine that? And there's also another thing one has to consider. Of course, you do all this intuitively, organically. But when you start realizing that these models can be used as a creative tool, it is then that the boundaries are erased. And as far as the pedagogical aspect is concerned, it is wonderful that you and your teachers, who teach the new generation, that you set high standards for these young people. Is that why it is said that the best students have the best teachers, and vice versa? Only because they expand each other's boundaries. Technique can be taught to anyone. It is just a technique, but the key to a great result is inspiration and the way you think.
Whenever I organize our students' big concerts at such serious venues as, for example, the Kazakhstan Concert Hall, or in a large music hall in Moscow, in St. Petersburg, or in Carnegie Hall in New York, when there are 2,000, 3,500 people, it can be very energy consuming. And I have all kinds of students. Some are freshmen, some have just started, and they're not playing brilliantly. But whenever we rehearse, I do a bit of pep talk with each of them, insisting that they should feel like world stars, because they're exposed to such great music. In general, I use many inspiring words. I never criticize. And I see that this sense of significance and magnitude is growing in them. And our concerts were such a tremendous success, precisely because everyone was embraced by this creative process. It seemed that magic was happening. My point is that this very interesting technology of persuasion has always worked for us. Each person has something large and significant inside that needs to be brought out to the surface. Once, my friend, a filmmaker, told me, you probably think that movie stars are creatures from another planet. They're different people and so on. But they're the same as you are. They get the same experiences as you do. They have the same doubts. They also have difficulties, anxieties, and fears. Now, being on a new stage of my development, I somehow understand and accept this. Although before, it seemed to me that this was an exaggeration, that it was some kind of deception, that there was something so wrong about that. But now I would like to talk not about the sphere of art, but about our entire society in general. So you work not only with people of art, but also with representatives of other spheres of life, right? So what is happening there?
In fact, there are certain standards that apply to any industry. This applies to sports, business, whatever. In sports, for example, the first prize can be the matter of just milliseconds. The technique is the same for everyone, but only milliseconds allow Michael Phelps to become Michael Phelps. Why? Because he believes in himself and says to himself, I am number one, I am a winner, I am an Olympic champion, 5, 10, 20 times. It does not matter. He clearly understands this, and even before the start of a competition, he already feels like a winner. Moreover, all those who are next to him have absolutely the same technique. Some are younger, some are better. But he alone believes in himself that much. And this faith allows him to win those very milliseconds. And no matter what area you apply this to, everything happens the same way, be it business, be it sports, or career building. After all, who climbs the career ladder? Not the one who knows the most, but the one who feels worthy of promotion. The question of self-esteem is the most important thing. How you feel affects what is happening around you.
Something inside me is protesting against this theory because I know that it is one thing to imagine, believe, accept, and another thing to actually work and create something.
There are three components to this. There is the desire to want, and there's the word to have. That is, we want to have something. But between these two concepts, there's a very important component, to do it. What I mean is, it is important to do your job a little better every day. When you just do it without enthusiasm, without understanding the future, this is one thing. But when you mentally see the ultimate goal and understand why you need it, then you become 10 times more effective.
Why do some people become internationally renowned? They immediately become common knowledge, they get their success and recognition, everyone is interested in them. And for some reason, with approximately the same efforts, nothing turns out for someone else.
This is a good question. There are two important moments to this. There is a time when it is necessary for something important to come into your life, and there's a time when you have to gain some experience, make some mistakes, and learn something. If we talk about which of the two people is lucky, then firstly, we never know for sure what preceded the victory of each of them, what it cost them. If that person believed in himself so much and believed in this miracle that, eventually, it happened. The second person may also want this, and he may even do the same things as the first. But there are 2 points. He may not have enough faith in himself and does not want it so much. And second, maybe it's just not his cup of tea. Maybe he is good at something else. In the end, we still return to the power of intention. How much do you want it? How much do you want to be a star of global magnitude? That is exactly how much you will succeed, despite the fact that daily actions are
efforts.
Yes, they're equally important. 10 people can apply the same effort, train the same, do the same daily activities, but out of 10 people, in the best case scenario, only 1 or 2 people will succeed. Why? Because their intention was much stronger than the intentions of the remaining 8 people. I have studied a lot of biographies of successful people, and this is not necessarily about success per se. Everyone has their own path, difficult and challenging, but the common denominator for all of them was that they never gave up their dreams.
As for me, I never dreamed of what my life would be like. Somehow I don't think far ahead, I'm just interested in the process. I've always been interested in the piano, but it has never been my ambition.
I see.
I was interested in its design. I wondered, how can I extract sounds that I hear in my head from this instrument? From my early childhood, I had this fascination with the piano, the fascination that still does not go away. Every time I'm amazed at what a miracle it is. I work with the piano as with some kind of living creature, which was created absolutely brilliantly, but I never set myself a high goal.
What is more important, the process or the result? And the one who can enjoy the process always wins.
Wow, really?
The process is a daily routine, and when you can enjoy this daily routine, it is incredible. What I mean is, if you enjoy the process, this process will lead you forward, and eventually the result will come. We all know there are past, present, and future. This is the standard concept of time, but in fact, the past does not exist. In our brains, we have these neural pathways that are able to return us to the past. There is no future either. We cannot foresee it. But there is a present, and what is the key to happiness? Living in the present moment and having a clear vision of the future? Or to just perform some actions without giving too much consideration to the result? I don't know. I don't think this is a path to happiness. In any case, any person wants to reach a certain destination. Happiness is about being present. It is when you enjoy the process and, at the same time, visualize your future. And these two things set you in the right direction. So it is absolutely necessary that you are immersed in the present. And at the same time, stay happy about the process.
Recently, I released my documentary film, which was filmed for a very long time because my rectorship did not allow me to actually immerse myself fully into the creative process. For me, the university students and the needs of the faculty have always been in the first place, and my own creative individual life has always been set aside. And you know, since you praised this film so highly and reacted in a positive way, I now understand that it was created not only for musicians, but for everyone. This is my other attempt to bring people closer to classical music. This has always been my primary goal anyway.
You know, for me it was such a big discovery, and it was through this film, through classical music, that I felt this special connection, this feeling of being a guide to something huge. And at that moment, I felt such an aesthetic pleasure from just listening to music. I didn't just hear it, I felt the sense of belonging to something greater. I didn't know what exactly you were playing, but I felt such a boost of energy and inspiration that even now, talking about it, I feel excited. But I really felt a connection with the universe through this music.
In my life in music, I spared no efforts or money to record our concerts. Because once the concert is over, if it wasn't recorded, it is as if it had never existed. And as it happens, among all Kazakhstani classical musicians, I have the most recordings and videos of concerts in my possession. And in the end, having collected some good moments from these concerts, I've managed to make a documentary film in which I once again appeal to our viewers and listeners. In this film, I talk about the nature of classical music, and I share my views on how the musician, performer, in this case me, a pianist, reacts to such concerts, to the music she plays. What is going on inside a musician's head when he or she prepares for a performance? How does the life path and the creative state of a musician look in general? Usually musicians only play and do not speak, and it seems that music cannot be expressed in words. But apparently, I have this strong urge for enlightening people. So I still want to explain music in words to convey my feelings. The only purpose of this is to help people who are not so deeply familiar with classical music to come closer to it, to understand how beautiful it is and how much happiness it can bring to both listeners and performers. After all, music is the great treasury of the human spirit. My father was an economist, and he taught political economics, economic sciences. He taught several generations of Kazakhstani economists. And I'm absolutely convinced that what I do as a concert pianist and what he did in his time, these are exactly the same things. He also had his ways in speaking with inspiration and captivating the younger generation with his studies. He had this deep understanding of his students and young scientists. And I do the same, but in the field of music. What I mean to say is that it doesn't matter what we do. It's important that we pass on certain things to the people around us. And if these people are ready to listen to us, we are absolutely happy. Why are we doing this? We have some kind of mission, right? Should we pass on things we received from our predecessors to the next generations?
There are different stages in the evolution of consciousness, and based on this theory, I will now explain to you why this happens. There are 4 stages in the evolution of consciousness. The first is the majority of people, about 90%, who say that everything is bad.
Decay?
Yes, decay. They say that everything is always bad. The government is to blame, the wife is to blame, the husband is to blame, the boss is to blame, and so on. They are in the majority, and they blame those around them for everything. At some point, a person begins to grow, and then he starts thinking, maybe it is me? This is the level of the rebel. When you start to doubt your reality, you engage in self-development. There are 5 to 7% of such people. And at this level, people want to share knowledge. The third stage is reprogramming, when a person, in a sense, creates his own reality. Einstein was like that in his time. Leonardo da Vinci too. And now we have Elon Musk.
Look at what we're discussing now.
Well, there's also a 4th level. This is an even steeper level, and it is clear that the ideal is almost unreachable. The process itself is important, because you enjoy the process, and it allows you to be in a permanent state of good mood on a regular basis, just because you love what you do.
Well, Baurzhan, I think we had a wonderful conversation today. The topics that we touch upon interest me primarily as a creative person, as I find in them a certain confirmation of my concert, pedagogical, and educational experience. Also, these days, so many people are fond of these topics, and it wasn't like this previously. After all, many did not care about intuition, consciousness, subconscious areas. They didn't give much thought to things like how to act, how to apply different techniques. But everything has changed, and it gives me a feeling of absolute happiness because it means that there are so many like-minded people around me. After all, for us, people of culture, it's always all about looking for like-minded people. There are not so many of them, as everyone thinks that culture is good, and still, they don't want to become more cultured. And the fact that people have this need for development, that they turn to their soul, to their consciousness, to me this looks like a new stage in the development of not only our country, but also of the entire mankind.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Zhaniya. It was a great pleasure for me to talk to you about this topic. Culture and consciousness are 2 components of one thing, and it was very important for me to make sure of this again.
See you.
See you.